It was Britain's first Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole, who popularised the phrase, "Every man has his price." The Greenlanders disagree. They say that their country isn't for sale, and nor are they. For the moment, at least, they're backed by most of America's European allies. Once again, it turns out the special relationship with the Americans isn't that special. He didn't even call to say we'd be hit by tariffs just like everyone else. Robert Jenrick, Bobby J to his new friends in Reform, told the Conservative Party that their relationship was over. They say, "We dumped you first." Scotland's First Minister tells us that if he wins in May's elections, it'll mean a breakup with Westminster. And he reckons the end of Keir Starmer's time in number 10. We'll get immediate government reaction to that fresh tariff threat from the United States with Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy. And speak to the President of the United Nations General Assembly and former German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. After the party's big defection unveiled this week, I'll be joined by Reform's Zia Yusuf. Scottish First Minister John Swinney tells us he'll be asking for another independence referendum if the SNP wins the elections in May. Plus, with us throughout the show, former Conservative Defence Secretary Dame Penny Mordaunt, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee Dame Emily Thornberry, and Times Washington editor Katie Balls. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Buying and selling territory is not a novel idea, especially not to Americans. In 1803, the United States almost doubled its size with the so-called Louisiana Purchase from France for the equivalent of about $400 million in today's money. They got Alaska from the Russians in 1867 for less than $150 million. So these deals do get done. America's floated the idea of a Greenland purchase 5 times in the past 200 years, most notably in 1946 under the Democrat president Harry S. Truman. Perhaps what we're seeing now is just the start of another negotiation. With 100,000 American dollars allegedly being dangled before each of the island's 57,000 inhabitants, this story could have a few more twists and turns before it's finished. Back home, Nigel Farage has acquired his newest member for absolutely nothing more than a few good lunches. The former Conservative Minister Robert Jenrick joined Reform on a free transfer, saying the Tories were finished. They said, good riddance. The big question is whether other Tories will follow him. And that depends on whether they believe that Mr Farage can offer them a wad of the only currency that truly matters in politics, power. Let's start with the government. I can speak now to Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy. Good morning, Secretary of State.
Hello, good morning.
Can we start with Mr Trump's tariffs? He says that he's going to impose an extra 10% on anything we send to his country, if we don't agree to support his plan to buy Greenland. Now, speaking on behalf of the government, can you say that we will never accept such a proposal?
Yes, of course. I mean, the Prime Minister was very clear last night that we believe that this decision on tariffs is completely wrong. The future of Greenland is for the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark to determine, and for them alone. We've been consistent about that. That is a view that we've expressed to our friends and allies in the American administration. And we believe that at this moment, with the serious challenges, especially in the Arctic region, affecting not just us, but the United States, Canada and most of Europe, that we need to be working together in order to resolve them. It's why the Foreign Secretary has just been in North Norway. She arrived home last night, working with our Norwegian counterparts to strengthen our programme there and to double the number of Marines in the region. But we're working across the board with our allies, and we need to work together, not to divide ourselves from one another. So we believe that these tariffs are the wrong approach.
So for all time, we would never agree to support an American purchase of Greenland?
Well, we wouldn't support anything that the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark didn't support themselves. It's for them to determine the future, and they've been very clear about their position on that, and we support that. We're not the only people who support that. Across Europe, you can hear very strong support for that. President Macron last night issuing very strong words about that as well. But our Prime Minister has been unequivocal. It is the position of the United Kingdom that the future of Greenland depends on the wishes of the people of Greenland and the people of the Kingdom of Denmark.
So how do we deal with it if Mr. Trump decides he wants to go ahead, apply more pressure, raise tariffs by 10% on the 1st of February, raise them by 25% on the 1st of June? Are we prepared to retaliate with tariffs of our own?
Well, before we talk about raising the temperature, I think we need to remember that the relationship with the United States is incredibly important to us and always has been, as is our relationship with our European allies as well. And when it comes to this issue in particular, there is a reason why not just President Trump, but previous American administrations have been very keen to secure some control over what happens in the Arctic region. And that is because of the serious challenges that Russia poses to us right now, and the need to work together in order to resolve that. The United Kingdom has a key role to play, and we are playing it, in making sure that we live up to those ambitions, that we safeguard that region in our interests and in the interests of the Americans as well. Those are conversations that the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister are already having with our American counterparts. We will, of course, discuss the tariffs issue with them, because we've made our position clear that we think that this is wrong and unhelpful, and that as allies we need to be working together. But the primary conversation that we're having with the American administration and with our European counterparts is about how we work in our collective interest in order to safeguard the Arctic region, to ensure that we keep our citizens safe and that we act in the interests of all of us.
I'm sure that's where you would like the priorities to be, but let's remember we've been here before. Last year, the Americans imposed fresh tariffs on us, and of course there was a negotiation, but actually we have tariffs now that did not exist 2 years ago. So what will we do if Mr. Trump, who on a number of things seems to be a person who does keep his word in spite of what's said about him, what will we do if he says on the 1st of February an extra 10% and the 1st of June an extra 25%? Are we prepared to retaliate in kind?
Well, this is the nature of diplomacy, is that we have to have good relationships with countries all over the world in order to be able to have those serious conversations about future decisions that other countries may or may not make. And, you know, you referenced the decision around tariffs that President Trump made earlier. He's actually made a series of announcements on tariffs, one of which resulted in the UK negotiating a lower rate of tariffs than other countries around the world, which has been
lower rate of
really
tariffs is still
important in
higher
terms of
than
safeguarding
before
British
Mr. Trump
jobs.
came in.
But look, let me give you another example. Very recently, the American president decided that he wanted to impose film tariffs, which would have had an impact not just on the film industry over in the United States, but also on our brilliant film industry here in the United Kingdom. We've been talking with him and with members of his administration about that, to talk about the serious challenges that would pose. That is the nature of diplomacy. You have to be able to have serious, confidential and very adult conversations, and people are capable of changing their minds. That's the conversation that we've been having with the American administration. We'll continue to take that approach.
It seems to me, I'm not going to get you to deal with the issue of whether we would exercise our right to erect trade barriers. There might be some other kinds of action that we could take. For example, King's due to go to the United States on a state visit. Might we delay that as a signal of our disapproval of the way that the White House has behaved this weekend?
Well, I think you have to remember that the relationship between the UK and the United States is very long and very deep. And when it comes to security,
not good enough for him to bring us up and tell us we're about to spank you with another 10% tariffs, is it?
Well, if you don't mind me saying so, Trevor, it just sounds a bit childish, because people's jobs and lives depend on us being able to have a serious conversation with our counterparts.
That's why I'm asking you these questions. That is exactly why I'm asking you these questions.
Yeah, and I'm trying. And that's why I'm trying to answer, because, you know, what you're urging me to do is to come on your show, shout and yell and say that as the Prime Minister has very clearly said, we disagree with this decision. We're going to go and have that conversation with our American counterparts, and while we're having that conversation with them, we're also going to be talking about the security of the United Kingdom and the United States and how our interests are better served by working together. Our position on Greenland is non-negotiable. That we've made that very clear, and will continue to make that clear. President Trump's position on Greenland is different. Notwithstanding that, it is in our collective interest to work together and not to start a war of words. And were I to come on your show and say we're going to try and persuade the King to delay his visit because we're very cross, I'm not really sure where that will get us. What we will do is continue to be clear about the UK's position and what is in our interests, and act in our interests. And it's in our interests to have a better dialogue with our counterparts, whether it's in Europe or in the United States, than the previous government managed for the last 15 years. That's how we got into this mess. It's not how we're going to get out of it.
I understand why you want to respond in that way, but let me just make perhaps one last effort in this. You're dealing with an American president who is unimpressed by words. I mean, we all know that by now. You know that. And you can have as many conversations as you like, but what he has demonstrated in the last 12 months is that what matters is what you do. And what I was trying to ask you is, what would we do, as opposed to what might we say, what conversations might we have?
Yeah, and the answer to that is that we'll act in the UK's interests, and we'll take decisions on the basis of the discussions that we have, but they begin with a discussion. It's discussions that have got us to the point where the Prime Minister is one of the only people in the world who was able to pick up the phone to President Trump and help to get us to where we've got to on Ukraine. We're one of the only countries in the world to be hit with a lower rate of tariffs than others, which have protected thousands of British jobs. And we've been able to work together in order to secure a far stronger relationship with our European counterparts and with the United States. People told us it could not be done, that we had to choose one or the other. The Prime Minister believes that's nonsense. He's right about that, and he's showing that, because the relationship that we've been able to have is bearing benefits to the British people. But we'll always be clear about our principles. And I tell you, as somebody who's worked with key members of the US administration, although not President Trump directly, that I think they do respect that. They understand that. We have our own clear position. We will stick to that, but we'll also be willing to talk to them about what we can do in our mutual interest.
OK, can I just ask you about a domestic issue? Now, Nigel Farage claims that the next defection to Reform UK will come from a Labour figure. Everybody's making their bets on this.
It's not me.
Who do you think it's going to be?
It's definitely not me. I can tell you that.
I shouldn't put a bet on, I don't know, West Streeting?
Absolutely not. Not in a million years. I think he'd probably rather claw his own eyes out than get involved with that rabble.
Is it correct?
The truth is that it doesn't matter what... Go on, sorry.
I was going to ask you, is it correct, as was reported, that you warned colleagues that there was a prospect of a fascist government led by Nigel Farage?
Well, you wouldn't expect me to repeat what we said confidentially at Cabinet, but to be really clear about what I think about Reform and Nigel Farage. I think we've been here many times in history before. Certainly when I was growing up in the 1980s in Manchester, I come from a mixed race background. I've seen this playbook before, where people try to scapegoat and demonise other people, try to pit us against one another and divide us from one another, try to make people feel that people who are somehow different to you pose some kind of threat. And they do it for one reason and one reason alone, because they have no answers to the problems that the country face. It takes this country to some very dark and dangerous places, and I think we should have no truck with it at all. There is one group
he would say
of
you're
people
cancelling
who are
elections
responsible for what has happened
and getting rid of trial by jury. That allegation might be hurled at you.
I mean, he says all sorts of things, but let's judge him by what he does, shall we? Because if you were really standing up on behalf of working people, you wouldn't be voting down investment in the National Health Service and attacking rises to the minimum wage. You'd actually be turning up to Parliament and getting on with trying to sort out the problems that this country faces. And the truth is that it's not migrants in the end. It's not people with different coloured skin who are responsible for the problems that this country has. It's one group of people and one group of people alone. And they're the people that he's welcoming with open arms to his own party.
You scolded me for asking you to reveal private discussions. Well, this is a straightforward discussion. Would you actually use the word fascist about a Nigel Farage-led government or not?
Well, look, I'm not sure that labels are particularly helpful, but like I said, I've got a lot of experience of dealing...
You're not saying no?
Living with the consequence... Well, I've got a lot of experience of living with the consequences of othering and people who are trying to divide us from one another. And I guess I would just say that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, in my experience, it usually is a duck.
I think I know what that means. Lisa Nandy, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
OK, well, let's see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the former Conservative Defence Secretary, Dame Penny Mordaunt, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry, and the Times Washington editor, Katie Balls. Let's start with the Trump business, Penny. Conversations, words and so on and so forth. What would you be doing in this situation?
Yeah, well, I think you put your finger on it in that interview, because this is real power being used meets process. And I think that we must be careful not to overreact. I think actually sending troops is an overreaction. And the use of tariffs and trade policy to try and put pressure on people on this is a direct response to the US Senate reining in the president on some of the things he's been saying about military action, just as they did on Venezuela as well. What is absolutely critical is we focus on what the president's real concerns are, which is about the security situation in the first instance. There are things I think the UK government could be doing. We could be doing what we said we would do and start the flow of money into rearming and getting our industry better equipped to defend us in the coming years. I think there's also some things we can do to help business, because those tariffs, the first wave is likely to cost business about $6 billion, the second about $15 billion. We could pursue the US state-level MOUs. That's real money, particularly to our smaller exporters.
Doing deals with individual states.
Because that's where the regulation sits. So there's some things that you could do to help business if we're in for some bumpy times ahead. But I think the government's policy is right. This is a matter for Denmark, and it's a matter for Greenland.
Emily, do you think that the White House is going to pay too much attention to what the Europeans are saying?
Well, what the Europeans are doing, I mean, the reason that he's kind of gone off on one is because there is a military exercise at the moment in Greenland by European forces, including Britain. That's what's upset him. And so now he says he's going to introduce...
That's a big... I was 15 people.
Well, I know, exactly. But, that's what's happened. And, he's the one who says that we should be paying more attention to defending Greenland and how important it is. And there we are, we do it. And then he gets upset again. And so he says he's going to introduce 10% tariffs. I mean, let's see. I mean, obviously, Katie and I were talking about this before we came on, but there's a Supreme Court judgment in the offing, which is all about whether or not Donald Trump can introduce tariffs in this way. And we will see what happens. The question for the Americans is, can Donald Trump simply sign a piece of paper in front of the media and introduce all these tariffs? Or does it need to go through Congress? You'd think it ought to go through Congress. And the truth is at the moment, as Penny has intimated, there is not universal support for what Donald Trump does in these instances, and I think there is increasing fraction. You can see the MAGA base beginning to get seriously worried about this, and definitely. I mean, when I went out to the United States at the beginning of the year, and again last time I met Katie, it was very difficult to get a Republican to say anything different to what Donald Trump was saying, and now things are definitely starting to change.
Katie, you've actually been talking this piece in your paper this morning. Your interview with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Republican. What do you think Trump's up to here?
Well, it's a great question. I think one of the points Mike Johnson, who has one of the most senior jobs in American politics, in charge of Congress, and is obviously a senior Republican, one of the points he made to me was, Donald Trump is not the first president to say we're interested in Greenland. This is, there've been various attempts, as you mentioned earlier on the show, to purchase Greenland, going back over many years. Obviously, what is different with Donald Trump is how he goes about it, his style, the way he applies pressure. And therefore, I think when we're looking at this, I think even in DC, you have figures in MAGA, the administration, department slightly guessing as to whether this is, maximum pressure. There's talk of, we'll get it the nice way or the nasty way. And then actually, is there a negotiated, settlement where the US has more control on security and Europeans step up and there's a landing zone, or is this an all or nothing? And I think that there's a bit of a risk at the moment. And I think Emily's completely right that in Congress, and even Mike Johnson, he was saying to me that diplomacy, negotiation is the best path. If were Donald Trump to actually try and invade, that would be something which you would see, a mass revolt on. But I think, the way that the Europeans are responding to this, the administration thinking of those around Trump is that Europeans and Denmark do not have enough money to protect Greenland. They are pretending to do so. The troops were minorly insulting because it was such a small number, it was performative. And therefore, put your money where your mouth is, we're coming for your money. And that's the tactic right now.
Yeah, but the truth is that the Americans only have one icebreaker anyway. I mean, they say, and they used to have all these bases and they closed them down. So I think, we're going to start kind of trying to find fault. I think there's fault on all sides that they haven't been taking the high north. Anyone's been taking the high north sufficiently seriously, and we need to start doing that, and we need to do it together.
The difference,
through this thing called NATO.
The difference, though, is that the president has made a massive commitment. He's increasing defence spending by 50%. We've said we will meet the new NATO floor. That money doesn't start coming online until 5 years' time.
We're supposed to get to up
That's
to
the
3%.
Difference. So I'm not in agreement with everything that the president does, but I think that he has real concerns that we're saying nice things about, but we're not actually doing it. And we are going to be in trouble in short order if we don't start getting our industry into a position where we can adapt. I'll just leave you this statistic because it's mind-blowing. We know from Ukraine that the shelf life of technology in the field is 6 months. So you've got a drone or you've got a weapon system. In 6 months' time, it's out of date. We have got a massive step change if we are going to defend this country and its interests. And we have to start spending the money now. The president is right to boot us up the backside on that, and I will support him in doing it because we have to.
Trump's point is that, we say that we do the big talk, but actually we don't spend money, as Penny's saying, and that the threat coming across Greenland has increased, because climate change has opened up a passage for the Russians particularly, and that actually the Russians and the Chinese are more interested than they used to be. So the threat is real, and he doesn't trust us to do the job.
Yeah, but your argument doesn't stand up. I'm sorry.
No, it's not my argument.
The argument doesn't stand up because of NATO. The whole point is that we are in NATO together. These arguments should be something that happen within NATO. You don't need to push NATO out the way and say, well, I'm going to do it. When you're in NATO, and so is Greenland, and so is Denmark.
But isn't the problem that we've been in NATO for, getting on for 80 years, and we haven't actually, NATO overall, has never quite done the job it's supposed to do.
Well, that's not true.
Because it's always relied on America.
No, that's not true, because the one time when the Americans said, help, come and protect us, something has happened after 9/11.
Afghanistan, I know.
And everyone went into... And which was the country that lost the more people per
Denmark.
head? So, NATO works. All for one and one for all does work. And it's not right for the president to try and push NATO out of Greenland and say, I'm taking it over. If you want NATO to step up more, do it within NATO.
Katie, what about the money? Would the Americans spend the $5.7 billion that's being rumoured as an offer to Greenlanders?
Well, given the president likes to pride himself at any time in the day on the art of the deal, you can expect that he would try and cut a price that he would like. But I think they are willing to spend money on it. I think obviously then you have a question of the domestic reaction. If you look at general polling of Americans, there's not mass support for this idea of taking Greenland, whether it's a purchase or others. So there could be a kickback there, and then the question is it the best use? But I think that they are serious about it. I just add to the Greenland discussion. The other thing is there are moves towards Greenland independence.
Yes.
And that's another thing that does worry figures in the Trump administration, which is if Greenland does go independent, at that point, what's the position further on with NATO, where they go, when you're looking at these threats from Russia and China?
But they have also said, though, in reaction to the pressure from the Americans, the Greenlanders are now saying, "Well, look, we'll stay part of Denmark." The appeal of going independent has suddenly shrunk when you've got America breathing down your throat and saying, "We're going to take over your country." Suddenly, they want to be Danish, and that's understandable.
There is a pathway through, but we have to take the security issues seriously. That's at the heart of this. And at the moment, collectively, Europe has not done enough to reassure the president.
The real issue is, it depends whether you believe that Mr. Trump will actually do what he says, and he may not do all of what he says, but we've seen...
And of course, the tariff issue is still up for debate.
Exactly. When it comes to tariffs, we've seen he's done some of it, and we know that this is damaging. Last year, Jaguar Land Rover stopped production. This could torpedo the growth agenda, don't you think, Emily?
Of course. It's completely irresponsible, which is why it needs to be done through Congress and not by him signing a piece of paper. He does change his mind. When you say he doesn't change, he does. Look at all the things he threatened China, and look at the relationship now with China and tariffs. That's all changed. You just need to kind of stand up to him a bit, and that is what the government's doing, and I'm glad to see it.
I think one of the difficulties, though, is we understand Downing Street were not forewarned about this.
No, neither was anybody else.
We also have a situation, but I think also people think the UK-US relationship has been better in Trump's second term than European countries.
Yeah, but did people even in the American administration know it was going to happen, or was it something that just popped into his head?
But when we're thinking about how Keir Starmer gets this back to where he needs to be, I think that you're going to have an issue where some domestically are going to say, this guy is not treating the UK with sufficient respect. We should start talking up to him, a bit more like the French do. But the risk of that is it's then even harder to get in the room and influence. So I think it's a tricky domestic kind of balancing act for the Prime Minister too.
Which is what Lisa was doing, and you could see it was difficult for her.
Penny, is this, Sir Keir has got this reputation as the Trump whisperer. Is this going to wreck the relationship? Because he's obviously, he's landed so far today on the Macron side of the equation.
Yes, I think you should not overreact to this. But I do think that the UK would be strengthened in that relationship if it started to do some of the things which Keir Starmer has stood up in front of us all and said we need to do, i.e. spend more on defence and reassure the president in that respect. I think we would have more credibility when we're having these discussions if we were doing what we promised we would do.
Well, let's not overstate that. We are doing it. We're just perhaps not doing it as fast as some people might say.
Well, that's fine then.
Let's not say we're not doing it.
Our defence chiefs have given us 4 years to modernise our armed forces. The money doesn't arrive till year 5. That's no good for anyone.
We will keep talking about this transatlantic relationship, the relationship between us and the Americans and NATO in a moment. But I now want to talk to Annalena Baerbock, who is the President of the United Nations General Assembly and a former German foreign minister. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. What is your reaction to the announcement by Mr. Trump of these tariffs in relation to Greenland?
Our UN Charter is not optional, it's indeed existential. And this has been the answer from the United Nations, but from almost all the states in the last decades. I came here to London to actually commemorate 80 years of the United Nations first General Assembly meeting here in London. You could still see back then the wounds of war. And if we remember very, very well, there was a reason why we drafted in the past this Charter of sovereignty for everybody, territorial integrity to everybody, knowing that if we would not respect the territorial integrity of any other state, that would end in a disaster. And this is exactly the message the world needs right now from the whole international community.
Well, of course, the White House would say this is not a matter of territorial integrity. What they're doing is offering to purchase Greenland, and this is a perfectly legitimate property deal, which isn't, at this moment anyway, to do with invasion or taking over anybody else's territory.
But the right of sovereignty lies with the people in every country. And the people of Greenland, the people of Denmark have been crystal clear about it, that it's their self-determination. And international law is very clear. Obviously, we are living in a time where some challenge these international rules, but everybody has to ask themselves what would be next. And we should remember very well 4 years back in time with regard to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that Europeans called on everybody around the world. You mentioned that I had my former capacity back then. I was literally calling all around the world saying this is not only about Ukraine, this is not only about the European peace order, it's about the international peace order. And this is why over the years there has been the support from African countries, from Latin American countries all around the world, knowing that no country on earth, especially mid-sized and smaller countries, could sleep in peace anymore if we would accept that other countries just invade their neighbors, especially P5 members. And I think this is very important to underline as well, that P5 members do not only have a right of veto, they have the responsibility to protect the international order. And if they are not standing up to that one anymore, we need this big coalition, the big alliance of those countries who know that this is the only chance, their only life insurance for their people.
About 5 members of the Security Council you're referring to there. So how far should Europeans go to resist an American takeover? I mean, what should the Europeans do other than issuing statements, which, as we know, Mr. Trump has... he's not got that much regard for what people say. He's interested in what they do.
My role as a president of the General Assembly, representing 193 member states, is not to give advice to any certain group. However, I also swore my oath on the Charter and in the international principles. And therefore, standing up for these principles, this was a call from myself the other day in the General Assembly when we were speaking about the priorities for this year, also from the Secretary General as well. And we have seen in the last months that whenever there was this big group, more than 2/3 majority within the General Assembly, being very crystal clear from the beginning on, cross-regional, not only Europeans, not only Latin Americans, but cross-regional cooperation. There has been also quite some strength in the General Assembly. Remember, for example, in these times, everything passes by so quickly. But with regard to Gaza, there was this Riviera Code plan from President Trump. Back then, also having this idea of a big deal. But immediately, all the Arab countries, especially the Gulf countries, were saying this is no option at all. Immediately, all the Europeans back then joined this. So there was a strong coalition of saying international law has a clear limit. And this so-called Riviera plan was dropped afterwards. And I think this is a very perfect blueprint. You have to be very quick, you have to be very united, you have to be very strong on your messages, and especially this cross-regional cooperation. And I'm a fan of also saying don't always look at the negative side of everything, because this can be also a big chance for many countries if we join new forces of alliances. And again, President Trump in the high-level week of the General Assembly in September, we had this two-states conference, 140 states joining forces. The Americans were not part of it. And suddenly, afterwards, when Saudi Arabia and France opened it, then the Americans were ready to bring the discussions, the peace plan in the Security Council, showing again that they are not neglecting everything. They want to be part of the party, but obviously it needs the strength from those who are making clear what their rules are.
So what is your message to the White House this morning is back off?
Well, my message is that the international law, the Charter of the United Nations, is our common life insurance, and for every country around the world. Also strong economic powers, they cannot handle the world challenges alone. Just think about COVID. Think about the climate crisis. This doesn't stop at borders. CO2, neither a pandemic have a passport. So in the end, cooperation pays off. Obviously, this is not the logic from every leader around the world. But we have seen also, I think you mentioned it before, with regard to the support in the United States as well, that especially about the question of Greenland, but also about the question what it means with neighborship relations, for example, take Canada. When they reacted very, very strongly, cut off also energy support, when they reacted very, very strongly also on whiskey, for example, feeling it on closure of factories within the United States. There had been further discussion also internally.
You said in a speech yesterday that the United Nations and its principles are under pressure but under attack. From whom?
By some member states and also including some P5 member states. If you agree altogether that these are our common rules, and then obviously the breach of Article 2 of the Charter, which is the most fundamental rule we have given ourselves, means that not everybody is singing from the same songbook anymore.
Everybody agrees about the Russians. Does this American démarche count as an attack, or at least putting the United Nations principles under pressure?
The Charter is crystal clear about annexations. It's crystal clear of the use of force. It's forbidden if not agreed in the international community. I think this is very important as well, because in these times of fake news or also turning the facts around, it's not as if the UN or the international community would not have any strength. If there's genocide, if there's major violation of human rights, if there's a situation where the members say that the world peace order is in danger, the UN could use even military action. But this is about to agree within the Security Council. This is not about one member state taking this up, and this is why the Secretary General of the UN and myself as the President, we have also underlined with regard to the last 2 weeks that the Charter, Article 2, the non-use of force unilaterally counts for every member, including the P5, including China, Russia, the United States, and UK and France.
Yeah. The White House announced formation of a Gaza Peace Board yesterday, including in its membership Sir Tony Blair. How does the UN respond to the Americans, in effect, excluding the UN? Because I would have thought this is the sort of thing the UN ought to be doing.
There has been within the Security Council also exactly the debate about this peace plan and resolution 2803, underlining and supporting the proposal from President Trump and the United States and also other countries from the region about a temporary situation within Gaza. And this is what the international community agreed on. But again, here, it's about the rule of law. We do have an international institution. It's called United Nations. They are best on delivering humanitarian support. And this is why the Security Council, I was in intense debate, made clear that the 20-point plan of ending the war, having a ceasefire, and then also having a temporary phase afterwards is supported by the international community.
The reason I'm asking, just if I may ask you briefly, finally, is that the United Nations is supposed to be at the centre of this international rules-based order. Is there a risk that what is happening now is, particularly through the actions of the United States, the United Nations is being sidelined in the age of Donald Trump?
As you quoted me, the United Nations is not only under pressure, it's under heavy attacks. Because if you give the impression that there should be another institution, then obviously this is threatening the United Nations. And obviously the UN is not perfect at all. But it's the only institution which has the capability, the moral one, but also the legal one, of bringing together every state, big and small. And if we question that, the equal rights to every state. Again, we fall back in very, very dark times. So it's now at the moment to every single member state to decide about for themselves to stand up and underline that it's in their own pure interest to defend this equality between states.
Annalena Baerbock, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Now back to our panel, Penny, Emily and Katie. Katie, this issue of the international rules-based order, of course, I mean, it's not the sort of thing that people are talking about in pubs, but there's a lot of conversation now about whether essentially the way we do things has now been superseded partly by the actions of the United States, great powers, but also by the actions of other actors here. How's it being seen in the United States?
Well, the president has obviously had a busy 2026 so far, but he gave an interview where he was asked about international law following Venezuela, the actions that he took there. And he was very much, that doesn't stop me. He almost suggested that international law was irrelevant to his plans and said that the only thing that could stop him was his own morality, his own decisions in his brain. And I think that just sets the tone of how the administration see things. So you hear interviews like the one we just had, very interesting, but almost speaking a different language to Donald Trump and those around him in terms of how they see the world. You have the Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller. He gave an interview this year to CNN where he said, the only thing that really matters is might and strength. You have Russia and China. You have these countries, they respect power. Stop talking about morality and, the goodness of democracy and bringing it, and starts showing that you have the might. And you have the US, putting lots more money into the military, as we were talking about earlier. And so I think that with this administration, at least, we're moving really away from how the West has been, seeing diplomacy for a long time. And the question is that specific to the Trump administration, or does it reflect something across the world, which is people getting quite fed up and exasperated by some of these institutions not doing the things that they thought they would?
Emily, I mean, there is a point of view that says that actually, whatever you think about Trump and all of that, that actually this is simply exposing what has always been true, but masked by a sort of international circus of politeness and words and so on and so forth. But the truth of the matter is that America's always made the rules and gets what it wants, and that all he's doing is being honest about it.
I don't know if you remember when Iraq's first invasion into Kuwait, and what happened with the first Bush was that he went to the United Nations and he got agreement.
This is Bush.
Yes, Bush Senior, and got an international force and pushed Iraq out of Kuwait, got Kuwait back. And he did it entirely through the United Nations. Now, that wasn't such a long time ago, and there have been a number of successes by the United Nations. I don't think that we should dump it. I think that if we go to the law of the jungle, then, frankly, nations like ours will definitely lose out. The United Nations created in Britain, a lot of international law written by British lawyers. There's a reason for this, that we should continue supporting it is because it is definitely in our interests. And I think one of the things, obviously Trump is a challenge, and I know Anna, and she was being very diplomatic, but she was saying back off. And the international community is saying back off Greenland, and saying it in a way which, may well work. And she uses examples of when the international community does stick together, and actually America has backed off. And I think her example of the Riviera, which I'd forgotten, Gaza Riviera.
The proposition that Gaza could... Mind you, that's, of course, what the Gaza Peace Board is supposed to do.
Well, no, I don't think it is. And all I'm saying is that actually this is, in a way, it's an opportunity for the international community to cleave more closely together. We are closer now. We work more closely now with the French, with the Canadians, with the Japanese, with the Germans, because we need to kind of put out... when this thing happened in Venezuela, everyone put out the same statement. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but everyone put out the same statement. And that, I think, is an example of closer working together, which is happening in reaction to Trump.
But, Penny, there is, let me push back this point of view, that in the way that the Americans have now forced NATO to recognise, NATO countries, I should say, that they were not spending what they said that they were spending, and has actually now started to force us to get on with putting the money, putting our hands in our pocket, that actually all that's happening here is that Trump is forcing everybody to recognise reality rather than just being, the rude guy in the corner.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. I'd say two things. The rules-based order is only going to enjoy support if it's actually helpful. And there are still a lot of conventions and things that we all subscribe to. They're good. But there are some which are completely out of date. I mean, the Refugee Convention, for example, written at a time when no one had a mobile phone, we weren't facing the kind of organised crime that we're seeing and people trafficking. So if we want these institutions and these international rule books to survive, they've got to be fit for purpose. And the UN and other bodies have to reform them. The UN's got a lot of internal problems, the power that China has, for example, in how the UN directs its resources. I mean, we had Iran in charge of human rights. It's got some problems. But what I would also say, Trevor, is that there are some negative consequences long-term for America in some of these behaviours. And when I talk to US senators, I say, do you know what? I have an America First policy too. I like a world where America has economic and hard power primacy because of what America stands for. And if you undermine that reliability in the eyes of other nations, then some things that are a given now may not be in many years hence. I mean, we don't have a fight about an American heading up the World Bank, for example, to give you a small example.
Which has always been the case, yeah.
Yeah, so there are consequences to some of these things, and Rubio is working very hard, I think, to try and smooth all of this over. But yes, let's focus on what real power means today.
In just a moment, we'll speak to Reform's Zia Yusuf.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist? Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The end of the week's been dominated by ructions on the right. Kemi Badenoch kicked Robert Jenrick out of the Tory party. And then later, he was unveiled by Nigel Farage as Reform's latest recruit. Reform's head of policy, Zia Yusuf, is with me now. Good morning. Your leader condemned Mr. Trump's announcement of tariffs over Greenland. Has he called the president yet? Because they're still friends, aren't they?
He wouldn't have done that because Nigel's made clear, look, it's not his place to do that. Keir Starmer's the Prime Minister of this country. But we are crystal clear. We are gravely concerned about this, very concerned. Bigger tariffs on this country will make it even harder for British manufacturers, even harder for British workers. So we are very, very concerned about it. And President Trump has said that those tariffs will increase in a few months if the posture doesn't change over Greenland. So Nigel's been clear about our concern about this.
But shouldn't it be part of his patriotic duty to use his influence, which is undeniable, to warn the president that he is damaging an ally?
Well, not to speak for Nigel, but as someone who works with him every day, if the Prime Minister of this country or the Foreign Secretary called Nigel and said, could you make that call? I very much doubt he would say no. But again, it's not his place to do that. It's up to the Prime Minister to make that call. And do you think he's going to do that?
I don't know. You know. You know. All right, look, were you in on negotiations to bring Robert Jenrick into Reform?
Well, look, the most important thing about Robert's arrival at Reform is, like, I had dinner with him on Thursday night, obviously the day he defected. My assessment is that this is a man who is thoughtful, who is clear-eyed about all of the different ways the Tories betrayed this country and wants to help Nigel, help me, help Richard and everyone at Reform repair that damage. And I also think it's crystal clear that him arriving at Reform makes it more likely that we win the next general election. And I think that's a really important milestone in order for us to do that, to turn the country around. At
that dinner, did he show his badge? I see in the newspapers he's going to be the new sheriff in town.
Okay, I wouldn't read. I'd lack the time to read about all of the palace intrigue stuff. Look, again, any time a politician moves from one party to another, particularly defecting between two fierce rivals, there's going to be briefing and counter-briefing. What matters is serving the people watching this programme, serving the British people. That's what we're going to focus on doing.
All right, well, when you talk to him, do you know what job he's going to do? We know that Danny Kruger is your policy guy. Malcolm Offord leads in Scotland. You've got a specific role. What's Jenrick's job going to be?
That's going to be a decision for Nigel to make. I think he's making those decisions now.
I asked Lisa Nandy this morning whether she would describe, whether it is true that she used the word fascist to describe a potential Nigel Farage-led government. She didn't say that she did not, and she ended the interview by saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then you know what it is. What do you make of that?
Well, I'd say if people actually look at the dictionary definition and of what fascist means and then look at what this Labour government has done, what has Keir Starmer done? He's cancelled elections now for a grand total around 7.5 million people in a short period of time, including millions of those people have had them cancelled 2 years in a row. His Justice Secretary is withdrawing the right to jury trials. That has been a right that's been around since the Magna Carta. His Attorney General is making, I think, unprecedented and extraordinary political attacks against the Prime Minister's key political rivals. Those, if we're going to start labelling people as such, well, those things sound far, far more worrying than anything Nigel Farage has ever said or done.
Are you putting the F word on Labour now?
Well, I'm not, because I think that if you overuse those words and you throw around these sorts of labels, and it's not just that word, it's obviously many other sort of extreme political rhetoric, number one, you cheapen that language, right? You diminish the memories of the people who suffered under people who were those things. And number two, you make politics in this country even more dangerous than it is. So I think it's deeply irresponsible to do that.
Do you know who the defector that Nigel Farage has promised from Labour is?
We don't talk about those things until they're in the public. We're not going to talk about this because, look, on a serious point, we talk to many, many different people all of the time, and it's not reasonable, I think, to betray those confidences. I want to say this too, because often people say, "Oh, is there any Tory or that you wouldn't take?" What people don't see is the many people that Nigel does say no to.
Ah, well, Kemi Baerbock seemed rather pleased by this defection. She said, I'm looking at her quote here, "You're taking out the rubbish for her, doing her spring cleaning." In truth, taking Tories relieves her of a headache, doesn't it?
Well, if Kemi Badenoch is focused on taking out the rubbish, there'll be nothing left at CCHQ or in the parliamentary party. Look, Robert Jenrick, and this is not my view, look at Conservative Home, the most reliable polling amongst Tory members and the Tory base of the shadow cabinet. Robert Jenrick was comfortably number one. So I think that's obviously in bad faith. And again, I think Kemi Badenoch is facing... Look, to be fair to Kemi Badenoch, I've said this for some time, the Tory party is so broken after those 14 years of betrayal, I don't think anyone could have resuscitated it.
Finally, what's your final aim? Is it to destroy the Conservative Party or to join in some way, convert it and join with it in some way?
Well, the reality is there isn't space for two centre-right parties in this country. There just isn't under our electoral system. So I'm afraid we must replace the Tory. You can call it destroy, replace, whatever it means. But we will not do a pact with the Tories. And I think, again, Robert Jenrick joining us and saying the things that he's done, excoriated his entire shadow cabinet at the Tories. There is simply no space for two centre-right parties. And anyone watching this programme who really does want secure borders and a sensible centre-right economy needs to get behind reform.
Zia Yusuf, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we'll hear from Scotland's First Minister, John Swinney.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
The Scottish First Minister has told this programme that if the SNP wins a majority in May's Holyrood elections, then he'll demand a new independence referendum. John Swinney said Keir Starmer would no longer be Prime Minister if that happened. I spoke to him at Bute House in Edinburgh in the first of our series of interviews with First Ministers around the UK. First Minister, you're asking the Scottish people to give you 4 more years in power after nearly 2 decades. Let me start here. Scots rightly used to pride themselves on the superior educational attainments of Scottish children. On your watch, Scottish children have fallen behind English pupils on maths and on English, in spite of the fact you spent a lot of money on it. Why should you be rewarded for making Scottish children less successful?
What we've seen over the lifetime of the SNP government is a long-term historic problem in Scottish education being tackled, which is the attainment gap, the difference between the attainment of children from deprived backgrounds and from less deprived backgrounds. And we've seen that reduce very significantly by over 60% over the lifetime of the SNP government. And in the most recent data that was published by the education system, we saw record levels of literacy and numeracy within Scotland's schools. So what I would say is that the performance of our education system is getting stronger.
But it's not exactly the answer to the question I asked you, is it? Because actually there has been a long-term decline. The PISA scores, the international standard for this, Scottish children on both maths and English are south of where they were in 2018. They are now less, their attainment is less than English children, which always used to be the issue. It always used to be a thing that you knew that the Scottish children were doing better than English children. And that's happened on your watch in the last decade.
What we've seen is that is one measure of the performance of the Scottish education system. But of course there are other measures, and the measure I've just given you about literacy and numeracy levels within Scottish education is the assessment of the performance of children and young people as they go through different stages in our education system.
All right, let's talk about another aspect of your government's performance. Your most famous campaign slogan, even, you know, I, a soft southerner, have heard this, it's Scotland's oil. It's always been at the heart of the SNP's case for independence, that oil would be part of your success. Now, you've ditched your predecessor's policy of having a presumption against new oil and gas. But you're not saying drill, baby, drill, are you? Just to be absolutely clear, are you going to support or oppose licensing of new oil fields?
Well, the first thing to say is that any decisions about the licensing of new oil fields are decisions for the United Kingdom government. They are not decisions that my government takes within Scotland. But the most important...
But whether you support it or not does matter.
That's just what I'm coming on to. And the key question that we ask about any new oil or gas developments is, are they able to be taken forward in a fashion that's compatible with our obligations on climate change? That is the absolute test that has got to be put in place.
Well, let me ask you about the case in point, really. Grangemouth is not going to produce green fuel. Hundreds of jobs have already been lost there. The UK government, Westminster says, is going to put £125 million in to save jobs. We think 500 or thereabouts. Rachel Reeves says that the Scottish government has been standing on the sidelines. What's going to be your contribution to saving jobs at Grangemouth, other than complaining that Westminster is not doing enough?
Well, we've already set out a financial commitment to essentially to supporting the transition at Grangemouth, and we set out a commitment to £25 million of investment in Grangemouth. And for some time we've been working on a venture called Project Willow, which is a partnership actually with the United Kingdom government, to find new opportunities at Grangemouth, but use it in a way that is supportive of our journey to net zero by the development of alternative technologies.
Scots have to judge you on your record. Talked about education, we're talking now about the economy. Scotland is experiencing a wave of deindustrialisation. Scots know what you've delivered, and you've delivered the beginnings of the deindustrialisation of this country. Why should they vote for you?
Well, I don't accept that characterisation. Yes, there is industrial change that we're facing because of the issues in relation to the transition to net zero. Part of my argument to the United Kingdom government, for example, is that the upsurge of renewables has not been as fast as many of us would have hoped it would be, and the decline of the North Sea oil and gas...
Is Ed Miliband getting it wrong?
Well, the pace is not as fast as it needs to be to compensate for the implications of the Energy Profits Levy, which is a product of UK government decision-making, which is making it more and more difficult to sustain activities in the North Sea. So there's a balance to be constructed.
You've been clear in your criticism of Westminster as being hostile to immigrants. Your activists, I see, come out on the streets in Glasgow and other Scottish towns saying migrants are welcome. You've had a really big go at reform. But your council leader in Scotland's biggest local authority says Glasgow is at breaking point, and she's specifically referring to asylum seekers and immigrants. Now, does Scotland, under the SNP, want more immigrants or not?
We want to be welcoming to migrants coming to Scotland because we have shortages in the size of our working age population.
So you do want more immigrants to come to Scotland?
So we need more workers in Scotland because our working age population is not as large as it needs to be. We've got very, very low unemployment in Scotland today, comparatively significantly lower than the rest of the United Kingdom. So we need to have people coming to Scotland to supplement our workforce, our working age population.
So what are you going to say to Susan Aitken when next time she says we can't have any more immigrants?
Well, the issue that Susan Aitken's not saying that. What Susan Aitken is saying...
Well, she says we're at breaking point. That's the phrase she used.
Well, the issue is about how all of this has been handled between the Home Office and Glasgow City Council, because the Home Office is not giving adequate time or support for individuals to become settled, and that's giving rise to incredible pressure on housing stock.
Can I just ask you a quick question about defence? You want Scotland to be rid of nuclear weapons. That's the SNP's policy. You've always been behind that. You don't want nuclear subs at Faslane. And that would mean the base and its jobs going. Some people would say that you're a bigger threat to the Royal Navy than Vladimir Putin.
No, what we want to make sure is that we've got the effective conventional forces that can ensure our safety and security as a country. That's always been our point of view, and indeed the Faslane base is ideally suited and situated to enable that type of protection to be offered to the coastline and to the waters of Scotland.
I want to ask you a very straightforward question. Supreme Court was as clear as daylight last year that sex means biological sex. Why are you still putting people with penises in women's prisons?
Well, there's obviously some complex legal issues that have got to be worked through as a consequence of the Supreme Court judgment indicated that there is a necessity for us to take account of the rights of transgender individuals, and that's the issue that has to be considered as part of the court.
It was as clear as daylight. You cannot put a person with a penis in a woman's prison.
But when you look at the Supreme Court judgment, what they said was that nothing that we do, and we as a government have to always obey the law, can in any way undermine the rights that are assured to individuals who are transgender individuals, and we have to respect that.
Are you sure you're not just dragging your feet here because because the SNP was on the wrong side of the legal judgment here?
No, because in various other areas we have changed the regulations that are in place and the guidance that are in place, so we've done that.
All right, let me just take you finally to, if you like, vulgar politics. Obviously, you want to win a majority in May. If you do win a majority, are you going to take that as a green light to demand another referendum on independence?
Yes.
So, absolutely, this May is effectively, in your mind, an independence election?
I'm being straightforward with people in Scotland that if people in Scotland want Scotland to become independent, the SNP has got to do really well in this forthcoming election.
When Keir Starmer says, as he almost certainly will do, no, you can't have a referendum, what are you going to do?
I think there's two things about that. First of all, the United Kingdom is allegedly a partnership of equals. So Scotland has got a democratic right to decide our own future. And secondly, if I win a majority in the Scottish Parliament elections in May of this year, I don't think Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister.
You don't think Keir Starmer will be there? Do you expect to see Keir Starmer in office at Christmas time?
No, I don't.
Because his party...
Well, look, I think it's patently obvious the Labour Party is absolutely toiling just now. And when I look at the opinion polls that are taking place in Wales just now, it looks highly likely it will not be a Labour First Minister in Wales, it will be a Plaid Cymru First Minister. The polls in Scotland are encouraging but not certain for the Scottish National Party. I'm working very hard to win the election, so we'll find ourselves in a situation where after May there'll be the potential for a Sinn Féin First Minister in Northern Ireland, a Plaid Cymru First Minister in Wales, an SNP First Minister in Scotland, and reform all over the place in England. And I think that's the end of the road for Keir Starmer.
And is it, by implication, the end of the road for the United Kingdom?
I think the United Kingdom has... Well, I want Scotland to be independent, and that's my policy objective, it's my political objective.
One last question, which is, in a way, a personal question. You've been in Scottish politics for a long time. You've been a big figure in UK politics. But you were always, if I can put it this way, the ballast to salmon and sturgeon. You were the reassuring presence. What do you bring that's different to those two leaders?
Well, I think what I bring is exactly what you said in your question, which is reassuring leadership to the country. This is a really turbulent time for people. People are very anxious about the cost of living. Addressing the cost of living was central to the budget propositions that my government brought forward. People are worried and anxious about the international situation. It is a troubling time. And I think people are looking for somebody that they can trust, that they can rely upon, that can give them reassurance. And that's what I offer.
Cheeky one, you're going to the World Cup?
I certainly will be, yes. That's another good reason for winning the election and remaining First Minister, is getting to go to the World Cup as First Minister.
First Minister, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, thank you.
Well, a quick word on that from Penny, Emily and Katie. Emily, your leader's going to be gone by Christmas.
Yeah. Listen, they've been in power for 20 years. You know, they have been given a huge amount of extra money. I think we've given them extra 10.3 billion, and they're still wasteful. They're still failing. And so what do they try and do? They're trying to go, oh, let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about the fact that we're wasting, I don't know, £440 million a year just on late discharges from the NHS. Let's talk about independence. Let's talk about anything apart from our record. The mess that Scotland's in at the moment is because the Scottish nationalists have been running it for 20 years. And as I say, they always avoid scrutiny by simply trying to talk about something else. Oh, let's talk about Keir Starmer. Let's talk about independence. Let's not talk about bread and butter issues, because if you talk about bread and butter issues, it's obvious they're failing.
So it's no likelihood of a SNP Labour coalition in Scotland then. Penny, what about this, the breakup of the United Kingdom?
So look, I think a lot of people would have listened to that and thought, 'twas ever thus, typical playbook from the SNP. But I think there are some differences, and reform are a factor in this. At the end of last year, Focal Data released some information that showed that 1 in 6 unionist voters would switch their vote to independence if they felt that Reform were going to be in charge of Westminster. And amongst Reform supporters in Scotland, at least a third are pro-independence. In fact, they fielded in the last general election pro-independence candidates. So there are some real dangers in here, and you could, over the next couple of years, potentially have 3 parties in the driving seat in the devolved administrations who are all pro-breaking up the United Kingdom. So us unionists, we cannot be complacent in this at all.
Katie, you spent many years covering all of this. Do you think we could be headed for Indy Ref 3 or not, or is that just bluster?
I think the question is always the mechanism. When I look at that interview, I think the first thing I think is the SNP still think the best way to get their vote out is to talk about independence. And they're playing to the base. They're saying we need the biggest majority possible for independence is to try and move away from some of the domestic issues. And the Labour government also has domestic issues, but that is a harder thing when it comes to your record, when you've been in government such a long time, so make it about independence. Then when you get to that point, we go back to what I've seen 10 years in Westminster, which is going over and over again how you do it. I think that under Boris Johnson, independence is particularly on the edge because he was a polarising figure in Scotland. Who, under Labour, it seemed to calm down to a degree, but you do see those things bubbling up again. And I think if Nigel Farage is Prime Minister, that's probably going to bring it up again once again.
OK. Earlier this week, we spoke to the country's top police officer, the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, and he said that there needs to be big and overdue reform of the police in this country.
We are overdue big police reforms. The current policing model is a tweaked and bastardised version of what was designed in a 1962 Royal Commission. It is so out of date for the challenges today. A unique thing about where we are today, police leaders across the system, we're all of a common mindset that the system needs to change quite dramatically. So you might say we're prepared to be the turkeys who vote for Christmas in terms of fewer police forces, fewer national bodies, a rationalising of this, and there's several reasons for this. People will immediately say this is going to damage local policing. Quite the opposite. If you've got a overly bureaucratic, complicated, convoluted, sort of spaghetti system, all of that complexity sucks resources away from the local. So actually, community policing struggles.
OK, we've got so much going on this morning. We are spilling out into other people's time. You can listen to the full interview with Sir Mark Rowley at 10:30. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent. A show of military might and menace. Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day. It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov. The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
British media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report, and this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Back to our panel, Penny Mordaunt, Emily Thornberry and Katie Balls. Just very briefly, Emily, in your role as a London MP, there's been a lot of controversy, argument this week about whether London is actually a criminal hellhole where you get murdered regularly or not.
Well, I think you probably, I mean, so the stats came out that the murder rate in London is the lowest that it's ever been since records began. And that came out this week at the same time as the mayoral candidate for Reform said that London was no longer safe. And there was a really interesting study came out by Dr. Mark Hill, where he just looked at the words London, lawless and dangerous. And in Reddit, there were 874 times it was said in the year 2008. And then in 2024, it was 258,444. Okay. Something is going on. There is, and I do not believe that's the public talking about that. That is bots. That's foreign interference in our democracy and trying to undermine our city. And the City of London's right to be really worried about the way in which it's affecting our city.
I just wanted to give you the chance to strike back. But let's come back to vulgar politics. Penny, Robert Jenrick departs for the Conservatives. Bad news for the Tories, or is Kemi Badenoch just putting a brave face on losing one of her most high-profile, recognisable lieutenants?
Well, I'm looking forward to the spittoon and the saloon swing doors being installed on the Westminster Arms. I mean, honestly. But look, in all seriousness, seeing that press conference and then what Kemi said afterwards, I was reminded of a Richard Rorty quote that I love, which is that national pride is to nations what self-belief is for individuals. It's a necessary condition for improvement. And I actually think what you've seen this week is some real clear differences between the Conservatives and Reform. There's always been policy differences. They'd spend more, they're not going to do welfare reforms, we'd try and reduce the size of the state. We've had all of that, but I think there's some real differences in values coming through now. And what you get from Kemi is she understands. I mean, if you've switched on your water taps this week and you've not had any water coming out, things do feel broken. But it's not the country that's broken, it's politics. And we want to get away from the kind of transactional politics we've seen this week to real transformation so that we can enable our country to face the future. That's part
of the Reform argument. They say that the problem is politics.
But the difference is Kemi is producing a policy platform, but she is also thinking how this can be done. And you can't do that by removing confidence from the nation or going to America and telling our closest ally that you should write us off. That is one of the clear differences between Reform's playbook and ours, and it's one of many reasons why I'm staying with Kemi.
OK, I was going to say, I know I'm not the sharpest knife in the toolbox, but I'm guessing you're not going to be departing for Reform.
No, I'm not. I'm staying with the Conservatives.
Have you actually ever been approached?
Funnily enough, no, although Nigel Farage did once say I looked like a Roman goddess. I don't know whether it was an overture, but no, because... and I'm sure there's a lot of...
We don't want to get into a discussion about which Roman goddess, because that...
No, but yes, that's that. He didn't specify. But no, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, and this is Reform's attraction, that actually most people aren't political. Less than 2% of the population have ever been a member of a political party. They just want things to damn well work. And the difference between these two right parties is that We are going to come up with the policy platform, but also how it can be implemented. And you don't do that by removing confidence in this country.
Katie, this was your beat for a very long time. What do you think is actually the difference here? Is there really one?
Well, I think if you look at quite a lot of the Tories who have defected to reform, and I think there's also important to point out that some of these Tories reform want, and that's when there tends to be a press conference. Others just join online and then tweet about it, you know, and they can't really stop that. So, but if you look at the ones they want, they tend to be those that if you think of some of the past debates, and I know these debates have moved on a bit on the ECHR, the ERG, often they're more on the right to where the Tory party was. It's not completely black and white, but I think it's funny how Broken Britain is becoming a dividing line between reform and Tories in terms of are you an optimist or a pessimist is how I think the Tories want to frame it, and patriotism. But I think one of the questions I have is, what is the risk for reform in bringing so many Tories over in terms of these quite established names, Nadeem Zahouri, now Robert Jenrick, Nadine Dorris? There's a slight aspect of almost having Boris's friends in the Reform Party so he can't make a comeback in the Conservative Party. But do they start to look a bit like the Tory Party to these voters who think they're going for a change? I think the reform argument, when you speak to those figures, is they think their biggest weakness is this lack of experience for government, so people might want to take a risk on them. So you get them, and that's the win. But I think, does it start to remind people a little bit of the Tory wars of the past?
Emily, just we've got about half a minute to go. The reform actually came second in, I think, 89 or something seats to Labour. Actually, their territory is taking seats from Labour. Worried?
Personally, I don't think so. I mean, I think that the fight is on the right, and we will fight whoever ends up being in charge of the right. But, you know, Jenrick leaving is not... I mean, he's been halfway out the door for a very long time. I'm just surprised that it took Kemi Badenoch so long to push him out. I mean, I would have pushed him out when he said that the police risk giving the streets to Islamicists, you know, or that he was appalled that he didn't see any white faces in Birmingham, or any of that sort of thing. I just feel like, I mean, you know, it's difficult to know, really, what's happening with the right at the moment.
OK. Thank you all very much. That's been great. That's it for this week's show. I will be back next Sunday at 8:30 in the morning.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.